So this week, tense and aspect. Now, first of all, form. So down the left-hand column, we've got tense or time references, and along the top, we've got aspect. So simple, progressive, we sometimes call it continuous, perfect, and a combination of perfect and progressive. So fill in the table and answer the questions. We may discuss the last one in particular. Now, verbs can be divided up into state verbs and dynamic verbs. So stated verbs allow the speaker to describe a situation as relatively constant, unchanging, with no obvious beginning or end, whereas dynamic verbs have the concept of change as an essential characteristic. They describe events, activities, processes, and we'll look at them in more detail. So first of all, see if you can decide which of these verbs are stative and which are dynamic, and then see if you can answer the two questions underneath. Now we can subdivide dynamic verbs into punctual and durative verbs. Punctual verbs describe momentary actions like hit, whereas durative verbs have duration. They describe activities like eat and processes like become that typically extend through time. So look at these verbs and decide whether they're punctual or durative, and then see if you can work out what the difference in meaning is when you use these verbs in the progressive or continuous. Now, we can subdivide durative and punctual verbs according to whether they have a clear finishing point. So activity verbs are durative with no clear start or end point. So dance, relax, play are examples. Accomplishment verbs have a clear end point, but they're also durative. So you build a house, you draw a picture. Achievement verbs are punctual but have a clear endpoint. Discover a book. Notice something. Momentary actions are punctual, may be repetitive, and state verbs are durative but with no action or change. So that's a summary of everything we've spoken about so far. Decide where you would put these verbs. Now, present tense. In this table, we've got a number of sentences illustrating 8 different uses of the present simple. You've got to decide what time they refer to. Do they refer to present, past, future, or are they timeless? And more specifically, what particular use are they illustrating? So the first one, Murray serves into the net. Murray's a tennis player. It's sports commentary. It refers to the present, and it pairs with sentence 13 on the next page. Ronaldo scores again. Both of those are sports commentary. Now, past tense. These examples of the past simple, do they describe a state, an event, or a series of events or habitual action? Past tense doesn't always refer to past time. What time is being referred to in these examples? And which of these sentences can you change into the present tense, and what difference does that make? Other ways of talking about the past, quite common, used to and would. What's the meaning, and can they be changed, interchanged? Now the progressive or continuous aspect. Look at the tense and aspect in each of these pairs of sentences. What's the difference in meaning between the two sentences in each pair? Now, one way of teaching tense and aspect is the use of timelines, which can be easily drawn on the board. So here we've got a line going from the past to the future with a middle point now. If you said, be careful, you're standing on my foot, you're standing on my foot starts just before now and continues just after the person speaks. So I've highlighted that little section. So how would you draw these ones? And then think about what do they all have in common, and therefore what's the underlying meaning of the progressive or continuous. The other aspect we have in English is the perfect aspect. So again, name the tense and aspect in each of these pairs of sentences, and what's the difference in meaning between the two sentences in each pair. Again, timelines. Draw timelines for these sentences and decide what they all have in common. What's the underlying meaning of the perfect aspect? More on the perfect. Which of these sentences are acceptable? Why or why not? Now, back to stative and dynamic verbs. Which time adverbial, just or for, would you be likely to use in each of these present perfect sentences? And then think about what's the difference between the meaning of stative and dynamic verbs when using the perfect. Now, contrast these pairs of sentences. Is there a difference in meaning? And can you explain it in terms of tense and aspect, both lexical and grammatical? Finally, why is it more common to talk about the present progressive rather than the present simple to talk about now? And why is it more common to use the past simple rather than the past progressive to talk about the past?